Christmas Eve at the Pfister Hotel in Milwaukee was supposed to be a night of glittering lights and endless champagne. The ballroom was polished so perfectly that every chandelier beam reflected across the floor like a second sun. 200 guests laughed, applauded, and lifted crystal glasses to celebrate the Dawson family's wealth and prestige. In the center of that golden glow lay me, Samantha Dawson, 19 years old, my red dress spreading out like a warning flare against the wooden floor, my face pale as the nurse knelt beside me. I could still hear her words echoing even as the world tilted out of focus. She screamed so loudly that the string quartet stopped playing. She shouted that I was dead. For a second, the entire ballroom froze. Forks stopped mid-air. Diamonds glittered on the necks of women who gasped and covered their mouths. Men in tuxedos looked away, but not before their eyes widened in shock. The nurse's cry traveled across the ballroom like a shot. "She is dead." The words slammed into me even as my lungs tried to hold on. I felt the pressure in my chest, the pounding in my head, and the humiliation more cutting than the pain. I was still conscious, though slipping. I heard people whisper, "Is that Richard Dawson's daughter?" No one rushed forward except the nurse and one voice I recognized through the haze, the voice of someone I had not expected to stand for me. My stepbrother Ethan's laughter, cruel and sharp, rang in my ears before darkness claimed me. Have you ever been beaten so badly by family that strangers thought you were gone? Have you ever watched your own blood humiliate you in front of 200 witnesses while your father turned his head away? That night, I was not just hurt. I was erased, and in the most public way possible. As I drifted between consciousness and silence, the chandelier lights above blurred into stars, and the thought that pierced through was not fear of dying, but fear of never being seen. I had spent 19 years trying to earn a place at my father's table, and in a single night, I was cast out like I had never belonged. Around me, the chaos swelled. Someone shouted for security. A glass shattered on the marble near the bar. High heels clattered across the floor as women scrambled away from the scene. The sound of cell phones clicking filled the air. Guests were not just witnesses. They were recording. My humiliation was live-streamed before the blood on my lip even dried. And yet, even as my body felt heavy, my heart beat with one stubborn certainty. This was not the end of my story. It could not be. The nurse's hand pressed against my neck, searching for the pulse she feared was gone. I heard her gasp with relief. "She's still here! She's still here!" But the crowd had already absorbed the shock of her first words. To them, I was gone. My father's eyes barely flicked in my direction as he adjusted his tie. My stepmother's diamond necklace glistened as she leaned into a donor, whispering excuses. My stepbrother stood above me, his fists clenched, his breathing heavy, his expression one of triumph, not regret. This was the moment that burned into every witness. A 19-year-old girl collapsed under the chandelier at the grandest Christmas gala in Milwaukee. Blood on her dress. A nurse screaming, a family looking away, and a brother smiling. That was the moment I understood the depth of betrayal. The humiliation was not just personal. It was public, unforgettable, and irreversible. If you have ever been dismissed by your own family, if you have ever felt invisible at the very table that should have been yours, then you know a fraction of what I felt. And yet what happened that night was only the beginning. The story of how a Christmas celebration turned into a nightmare would unravel minute by minute. The world thought I was gone, but I was still here, and I would not remain silent. This is the night my family tried to erase me, and this is the night the truth began to rise louder than their lies. The Pfister Hotel in Milwaukee glowed that Christmas Eve like the crown jewel of Wisconsin. Its grand lobby was draped in wreaths heavy with gold ribbon, the marble floors polished so thoroughly they reflected the flicker of every candle. Guests in tuxedos and glittering gowns poured through the entrance, their laughter echoing beneath the vaulted ceilings. Outside, the city air was sharp and cold, but inside the ballroom, the heat of bodies and ambition mingled with the sweet scent of poinsettias. For most people, the night was about celebration. For me, Samantha Dawson, it was about survival. My father had insisted that this year's Dawson family Christmas gala be larger than ever, a testament to his success, and the guest list proved it. Local politicians, Milwaukee business leaders, reporters from the Journal Sentinel, and donors from across the state all pressed together beneath chandeliers that spilled light like waterfalls of crystal. The banner above the stage read, Dawson Family Foundation Christmas Celebration, though everyone knew it was also a stage for Richard Dawson to parade his perfect family. The irony was that half of his family was invisible and the other half was me. I walked into that ballroom wearing the only red dress I owned, bought secondhand with wages from my job shelving books at the university library. It clung in places I wished it didn't, and hung loose in others, but I told myself red was festive and brave. My stepmother Caroline turned when she saw me, her sequined gown shimmering like molten gold. She did not greet me with warmth. She glanced once at the hem of my dress, curled her lips into a smile polished for donors, and slid her arm tighter around my father's. Beside them stood Ethan, my stepbrother, tall, broad-shouldered, his tuxedo tailored, his expression smug. He carried himself as if the ballroom had been built for him. He leaned down just enough so only I could hear. "You should not even be here, Samantha." His whisper slid into my ear like ice. I forced myself to keep moving. 200 guests meant 200 witnesses. Tonight, if they ignored me, they would at least see me. The tables near the stage glowed with silk cloths, centerpieces of white roses, and bottles of wine that cost more than a semester's tuition. The tables near the back where teachers, minor staff, and forgotten relatives sat were covered in polyester cloth, the flowers replaced with plastic ornaments. That was where Caroline directed me with a sweep of her manicured hand. "Over there," she said, her tone honeyed but sharp. I glanced at the front table, saw the place cards gleaming with names in gold script. Richard Dawson, Caroline Dawson, Ethan Dawson. Donors. Politicians. No card for Samantha. When I sat at the table against the wall, half hidden by a towering pillar, I could see only part of the stage. Every laugh from the front felt like a reminder that I was not meant to belong. My father moved through the crowd in a charcoal suit, his silver hair immaculate, shaking hands and laughing with the mayor. He never once looked my way. Caroline introduced Ethan to a group of investors. "This is my son," she announced with pride. "He will inherit Richard's legacy." Her voice carried across the ballroom, deliberately, the word son echoing like a bell that excluded me. The servers glided past with trays of champagne, ignoring the back tables until the front tables had been satisfied. The string quartet played carols, but their notes were drowned by laughter and the clinking of glasses. I felt heat rise to my face. Ethan raised his own glass, his eyes on me from across the room. He mouthed words that landed harder than any fist. "You will never matter here." The ballroom itself seemed designed to emphasize the divide. The chandeliers above the VIP tables burned brighter while our corner sat in shadow. The photographers clustered near the stage, capturing Ethan shaking hands with donors, while no camera turned toward the pillar where I sat. When Caroline leaned into a city councilman and said, "My son is already preparing to take charge of the foundation," she made certain her voice carried toward me. The councilman smiled. "Excellent. He said the future secured." My fork slipped against the plate. Future secured for them meant future erased for me. I thought back to why I had come. My father had promised once years ago that I would have a place in the foundation, that my passion for education, my dream of funding students who could not afford supplies, would shape its programs. Tonight, I clung to the memory like a lifeline. Perhaps he had not forgotten. Perhaps he would still keep his word. But as the evening stretched and his speeches praised Ethan's discipline and Caroline's support, my name remained unsaid. The guests around me shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a teacher named Mrs. Lopez, leaned over. "You're his daughter, aren't you?" Her whisper was full of sympathy, not recognition. "Yes," I said. She squeezed my hand briefly, a gesture of kindness, before looking away quickly as if even acknowledging me might bring her trouble. The distance between the front table and my chair was no more than 20 feet, yet it felt like another country. I could hear the laughter of donors, the clinking of champagne flutes, but it reached me like echoes from a world I could not touch. Every smile Ethan gave was another nail in the coffin of my belonging. Every nod my father offered him was another rejection. I straightened my shoulders, tried to focus on breathing evenly, but inside I felt the crack widening, the certainty forming that tonight was not just another holiday slight. Tonight was the stage for my erasure. At one point, Caroline called out across the room, "Ethan, come here, meet Senator Williams." My stepbrother strode past my table without a glance, his cologne strong, his smile perfect. Caroline's hand tightened on his arm as she introduced him. "This is my son. He will lead the next generation of Dawson philanthropy." Applause followed. I sat frozen. My fork poised my throat dry. Not once did she say daughter. Not once did Richard correct her. The hours ticked forward toward disaster. I did not know yet that humiliation would escalate into something darker, that laughter would twist into shouts, that a nurse would mistake me for dead. All I knew was the ache of exclusion, the sting of whispered words, the sight of my father looking past me as if I did not exist. Milwaukee glittered outside the hotel windows with Christmas lights, but inside the ballroom, one 19-year-old girl sat invisible while her family toasted her replacement. That was the stage set. That was the theater prepared for the nightmare to come. The string quartet shifted into another carol, the notes so sweet and polished they felt cruel against the unease in my chest. At the front of the ballroom, the photographers aimed their cameras at Ethan and Caroline, snapping pictures of them shaking hands with Milwaukee's wealthiest donors. Every flash of the bulbs reminded me of the absence of my own name, of the way my father's eyes glided past me as if I were a shadow. The gap between the tables might as well have been a chasm. I picked at the salad on my plate, the lettuce limp and unappetizing, more decoration than meal. At the VIP table, champagne flowed, laughter rolled, and the servers kept refilling glasses before they were empty. At my table, the breadbasket was nearly gone, and no one had thought to replace it. It was not just about food. It was about value. At the Dawson table, there was endless abundance. At mine, there was quiet neglect. Caroline rose to make an introduction. Her sequined gown caught every beam of the chandeliers as she guided Ethan toward a circle of city leaders. "Ladies and gentlemen," she called, her voice clear and proud. "This is my son, Ethan Dawson. He will inherit Richard's legacy. He will guide the Dawson Family Foundation into the future." Her words rang across the ballroom. They were meant for the audience, but they were also meant for me. A reminder that no matter what Richard had once promised, the heir had already been chosen, and it was not me. The applause that followed was warm and polite, but each clap struck like an insult. I lifted my water glass, the only thing left to hold on to, and swallowed the lump in my throat. My father joined them, his hand firm on Ethan's shoulder, his smile broad for the cameras. I could read the message even from a distance. This is the son who matters. The daughter is not worth mentioning. My mind pulled back unbidden to the years before Caroline, before Ethan, when I had been the one at his side. I had stood beside him at smaller dinners, handing him note cards with his speeches. He had once told me, "You'll be part of this someday, Sam. Your heart for teaching will inspire the foundation." That promise had carried me through the lonely nights at the dorm, through the double shifts at the library. And yet here in this ballroom, it dissolved into nothing more than a cruel memory. When Ethan finally turned his gaze toward me, he lifted his champagne glass in mock salute. He leaned close to a donor and whispered loud enough that the words carried. "Some people pretend to be scholars, but they never finish anything." His eyes cut into mine. "A college dropout wannabe teacher." The donor chuckled as if it were a harmless joke. My stomach twisted. I had never dropped out. I was enrolled full-time. But the truth mattered less than the narrative Caroline and Ethan crafted. To them, I was the failed child, the mistake, the embarrassment better hidden behind a pillar. Mrs. Lopez beside me shifted uncomfortably, her napkin clenched in her lap. She whispered, "You should not have to hear that." I forced a smile, though my throat ached with the effort. "Thank you," I murmured. She looked down, unwilling to meet my eyes, as if proximity to my humiliation might stain her too. The early conflict did not come with fists. It came with words sharpened into weapons. Caroline's voice carried again, bright and cutting. "Ethan will be meeting with our partners at Northwestern Mutual next month," she announced. "He is already proving his leadership." Someone asked, "And your daughter?" Caroline's smile did not falter. Samantha is still finding her path. The implication landed hard. Still wandering, still uncertain, still not worth celebrating. I wanted to stand. I wanted to shout the truth that I was studying education because I wanted to help children who had no other support, but my father's expression stopped me. His jaw was tight, his eyes steely. He would not defend me. If I spoke, he would silence me. Ethan circled closer to my table, his presence filling the space like a shadow stretching too far. He bent low so no one else could hear. "You'll never matter here. You're just an outsider." His smile was pleasant for anyone watching, but the words struck like blows. He tapped his glass against mine softly as if toasting. Then he walked back to the circle of donors, leaving me hollow. The ballroom swirled with conversations about investments, politics, and holiday vacations in Florida. Not once did I hear anyone ask about classrooms, about children, about education. The foundation was supposed to serve teachers. Instead, it had become a stage for prestige. I felt my face burn. My father walked by his arm, brushing my chair, yet he did not stop. He did not even look down. He moved straight to Ethan's side, laughing at something he said. It was as though I did not exist. I stabbed at my untouched entree, the roast cooling quickly, the vegetables overcooked. My appetite was gone. All that remained was the ache of betrayal building inside me. Every detail of the ballroom reminded me of the hierarchy. The silk cloth at the front, the polyester at the back, the crystal glasses there, the smudged water glasses here. The spotlight shining on Ethan, the shadows cloaking me. It was not an accident. It was design. It was a message. When the master of ceremonies invited guests to applaud the Dawson family, the spotlight swept across Caroline, Richard, and Ethan. The applause rose again. I sat stiff, my hands folded, my pulse pounding. The MC never said my name. Not once. I was not part of the family in their eyes, not worth mentioning, not worth clapping for. The night stretched longer. Conversations blurred, laughter echoed, and my isolation deepened. At one point, Ethan returned near my table to refill his drink. He leaned down, whispering again, "This is not your night. It never will be." His words slithered into my chest, heavy and suffocating. I clenched my fists beneath the table, my nails digging into my palms. I whispered to myself, I am his daughter too. But the words felt fragile, paper-thin, against the weight of the ballroom's indifference. That was the early conflict, the wound before the strike. It was humiliation, sharpened by public display words, meant to reduce me to nothing, and silence from the one man who could have stopped it. The guests may not have known it, but the night had already split into two halves. The half where I still tried to believe I belonged, and the half where I would be shown in the cruelest way possible that I did not. As the laughter from the VIP tables spilled across the ballroom, my mind slipped backward into the shadows of years I had tried hard to forget. The humiliation of tonight was sharp, but it was not new. It was only the latest chapter in a book of wounds written long before this Christmas Eve. My story had started not in the glow of chandeliers, but in the quiet streets of Kenosha, Wisconsin, where my mother Linda raised me alone with love that was simple, steady, and fierce. She worked long shifts at a local clinic, her hands rough from scrubbing her back, often bent with fatigue, but her smile never failed me. She believed in small joys, pancakes on Sunday mornings, walks by Lake Michigan when the weather allowed, and late-night talks about my dreams of becoming a teacher. She told me that children needed more than lessons, they needed someone who saw them. I carried that truth like a torch. When I was 14, that torch nearly went out. My mother grew ill, and within months, cancer drained her strength. I remember the smell of antiseptic in the rooms at Aurora Medical Center, the steady beeping of monitors, the way her hand still tried to squeeze mine, even when she could barely lift her arm. My father, Richard, visited once, brisk and distracted already, tied to Caroline, by whispers of business trips that stretched into something more. When my mother took her last breath, he was not there. He sent flowers instead. On the day of her funeral, the pew beside me was empty. He was across the country with Caroline. That was the first cut, the first lesson that I did not come first. The years that followed were colder than any Wisconsin winter. Richard married Caroline within a year, and she brought Ethan into our house in Milwaukee. I walked into what was supposed to be a new family and discovered I had been demoted to an afterthought. Caroline's perfume filled every room. Ethan's laughter echoed through the halls, but not with joy, rather with the sound of a boy who knew he was untouchable. The walls that had once held my mother's framed photos were stripped bare and replaced with Caroline's art. Even the kitchen smelled different expensive wine and imported cheeses, replacing the simple comfort of grilled cheese and tomato soup. At first, I tried to belong. I set the table, offered polite conversation, studied harder to show my worth. But Ethan was relentless. He mocked my clothes, tugged at my braids, called me charity case. One night when I was 16, I argued with him about using my mother's old desk for his homework. He shoved me so hard down the staircase that I heard the snap before I felt the pain. My wrist swelled purple and grotesque. At the emergency room, Richard told the doctor it was an accident. He told me later not to ruin the family name. Caroline's eyes were cold when she added, "Boys will be boys, Samantha. Do not exaggerate." That was another cut, a deeper one. I learned then to keep quiet, to hide bruises beneath long sleeves, to mask tears with smiles. Silence became survival. At school, I poured myself into lessons, seeking refuge in books and teachers who noticed when I lingered after class just to avoid going home. I told myself that college would be my escape, that someday I would earn independence through education, the very dream my mother planted in me. When I turned 18, acceptance from the University of Wisconsin-Madison felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Richard seemed proud for a moment. He promised me then, if you do well, if you graduate, you will have a role in the foundation. He said my classroom perspective would be invaluable. For the first time in years, hope sparked. I imagined standing beside him at events shaping programs that helped children like the ones my mother had cared for. I imagined finally being seen. But Caroline's influence grew heavier. Every holiday dinner turned into a performance where Ethan's achievements were polished until they gleamed while mine were diminished into footnotes. If I mentioned a good grade, Caroline would tilt her head and say, "That's nice, dear, but Ethan just completed an internship at a prestigious firm." If I spoke of a professor's praise, Ethan would laugh and ask, "Does anyone even care about teachers these days?" Each word chipped away at me. Richard never contradicted them. He let their narrative stand until it became the truth in his eyes. The memory that haunted me most was my 18th birthday. Caroline threw a dinner at a country club inviting Ethan's friends and several donors. She raised a toast, saying, "To Ethan, who has already proven himself a leader." Everyone clapped. Then she glanced at me, still holding her glass, and added almost as an afterthought, "And of course to Samantha, who is still finding her way." My father laughed politely. I sat frozen, my smile brittle, my hands trembling beneath the table. That night I cried in the bathroom until my eyes swelled shut. These wounds were not only emotional, they were systemic. They were the construction of a family portrait where I had been painted out. Every insult, every dismissal, every erased accomplishment built a foundation of pain that tonight in the grand ballroom came crashing back. When Ethan whispered, "You'll never matter here," he was not creating a new wound. He was pressing salt into scars that had never healed. When Caroline told donors that her son would inherit Richard's legacy, she was not just introducing him. She was rewriting the story, one where I had no chapter. Sitting at the back table with polyester cloth and plastic ornaments, I felt every year of rejection weigh on me. I saw my mother's face in my memory, her eyes urging me not to forget my worth. She had believed I would be a teacher who changed lives. She had believed I mattered. And yet here in this glittering hotel, the people who shared my blood treated me as if I were invisible. That was the truth of my past. Not an accident, not a misunderstanding, but a deliberate pattern of control, humiliation, and silence. Tonight was not the first time they had tried to erase me. Tonight was simply the night they did it in front of 200 witnesses. The clinking of silver against crystal rang out as the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. The buzz of conversation softened into expectation, and every guest turned toward the stage where my father Richard stood with the confidence of a man certain of his place. The chandeliers cast him in gold, his Tom Ford suit pressed to perfection, his expression calm and commanding. I watched from my seat at the back table, my stomach tight with dread. I knew in my bones that something irreversible was about to happen. Richard cleared his throat, his voice deep and steady, the same voice that had once quieted entire classrooms when he worked as an administrator before he moved into philanthropy. Tonight, he was not just a father, he was the master of this show. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this special evening," he began. "Tonight, we not only celebrate Christmas, but we celebrate legacy." Caroline glowed at his side, her sequined gown shimmering as she clasped Ethan's arm. They looked like a portrait curated for magazines, while I sat behind a pillar like an afterthought. Richard's words carried across the room. "For decades, the Dawson Family Foundation has sought to uplift education across Wisconsin," he said. "We have supported scholarships-funded teacher initiatives and brought innovation to our schools. But as with all things, leadership must look toward the future." He paused dramatically. I braced myself. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat loud in my ears. Caroline leaned into the microphone with a smile that could slice glass. "The future belongs to those with vision," she said smoothly. "And vision is exactly what Ethan represents." She looked at him with maternal pride, then gestured for him to step forward. Ethan rose his tuxedo perfectly, fitted his grin confident. The applause started even before Richard announced it. "Tonight, I am proud to share that my son Ethan will be taking on a leading role in the foundation as I begin to transition out of daily operations. He will represent the Dawson legacy moving forward." The words crashed over me like ice water. My chest tightened. For years, Richard had told me I would have a place in the foundation, that my passion for teaching and my commitment to students would give me insight no donor could replace. I had clung to that promise. And now, in a ballroom filled with 200 guests, he handed everything to Ethan. Not a mention of me, not a nod to my work. Only silence where my name should have been. The applause grew polite at first, then louder as donors rose to their feet. Caroline dabbed at her eyes, theatrically overcome with pride. Ethan spread his arms slightly, basking in the glow of approval. My fork clattered against my plate as I stood my chair, scraping the floor loudly enough that heads turned. The blood in my ears roared. I felt heat climb up my neck. My hands shook, but I raised my voice, though it trembled. This was supposed to be mine. The room fell into a hush, the kind of silence that magnifies every word. Richard's face tightened, his eyes narrowing. "Sit down, Samantha." He barked, his tone sharp and commanding. "You're embarrassing us. Embarrassing us." The words sliced through me. I looked around at the glittering guests, their faces caught between curiosity and discomfort. Some avoided my gaze, others whispered behind manicured hands. At the VIP table, Ethan smirked, his jaw tilted in triumph. Caroline's hand rested lightly on his arm, but her eyes were sharp, watching me like a hawk that had spotted prey. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. "You promised me. You told me I would have a place. You said my experience mattered." Richard shook his head slightly as if swatting away a fly. "Circumstances change," he said. "Ethan is better positioned." Better positioned. The phrase felt sterile corporate, as though I were not his daughter but a business liability to be managed. Caroline's voice rose loud enough to ensure the donors heard. "Some people are born leaders. Others are students forever." Her words floated like poison across the ballroom. A few polite chuckles followed the kind that cut deeper than outright laughter. I could not sit down. Not now. My entire body shook as I stepped forward into the aisle, away from the pillar that had hidden me. "I am his daughter, too," I declared. "I deserve to be heard." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Richard's face flushed red. "Sit down now, Samantha. This is not the place." His voice cracked with authority, but something inside me had broken open. Years of silence, years of swallowing humiliation, years of being erased surged forward. I lifted my chin. If not here, then where? If not now, then when? Caroline's mask of civility slipped for just a moment. Her lips curled as she turned to the security staff at the edge of the room. "Please escort her out," she said coldly. "She is disrupting this important evening." The guards hesitated. They looked at Richard. He nodded. "Security, take her out." I heard the shuffle of footsteps as the men began moving toward me, but before they reached me, Ethan blocked my path. He leaned down, his smile sharp and private. "You never mattered, Samantha. You never will." Then, with deliberate force, he shoved me backward. My heels slipped on the polished floor and I fell hard, the breath knocked out of me. The room gasped. Whispered voices flitted through the air. "Is that his stepdaughter?" I pushed myself up, my hands trembling, my eyes stinging. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to speak. "You can't erase me. You can't pretend I don't exist." My voice cracked, but it carried. 200 pairs of eyes were on me now, and the humiliation burned hotter than any wound. Richard's voice cut across the silence like a whip. "You are no longer welcome here." He said it clearly without hesitation, his face cold as stone. The words landed harder than Ethan's shove. No longer welcome. My own father casting me out in front of the entire city. The guests whispered louder now. Some lifted their phones recording. Others glanced nervously toward the exits. The perfect gala was cracking. The golden image of the Dawson family was fracturing under the weight of truth. I stood unsteady, clutching the edge of a table for support. My chest rose and fell rapidly, my heart hammering. "This is supposed to be about education," I said, my voice stronger now. "About helping children. Not about ego, not about prestige. You're giving power to someone who has never set foot in a classroom." Caroline snapped. "Enough. This is pathetic. Security now." The guards reached for my arms. I twisted away, pulling free, my breath ragged. Around me, I saw faces, some pitying, some cold, some simply curious. A few teachers at the back table looked at me with quiet sympathy, their eyes shining. One mouthed, "We see you." But at the front, Ethan laughed. A low, satisfied laugh that carried over the music and chatter. Richard straightened his tie, avoiding my gaze as though I were a stain to be wiped away. Caroline lifted her chin, her diamond necklace glittering as she tightened her grip on Ethan's arm. The escalation was complete. The humiliation was no longer whispered. It was public, undeniable, and brutal. The gala had turned into a spectacle, and I was the sacrifice. That night, in the ballroom of the Pfister Hotel, the line was drawn. There was no going back to silence, no retreat to invisibility. My family had declared war on my very existence. And though I did not yet know how, I felt a spark ignite in my chest, a promise to myself. They could try to erase me, but I would not disappear. The ballroom pulsed with silence so heavy it pressed against my ribs. Security hovered close, 2 tall men in black suits waiting for the signal to drag me away. My father's eyes were cold, his jaw tight, his command still echoing in my ears. "You are no longer welcome here." Caroline's lips curved in triumph as if she had rehearsed this outcome. Ethan stood directly in front of me, blocking my path, his posture loose with arrogance, his grin spreading like oil across water. I steadied myself, legs shaking, palms sweating against the edge of the table. I had been shoved, belittled, ordered out, but something inside me refused to collapse. My voice came out hoarse but carried across the hushed crowd. "I am his daughter, too. I have the right to be here." Caroline laughed softly, a sound that sliced sharper than words. "Oh, Samantha," she said, dripping condescension. "This is not your night. It never was." Then, louder to the crowd. "Some people mistake passion for leadership, but passion without results is just noise." She gestured elegantly toward Ethan. "Real leadership is standing here." Applause followed, hesitant at first, then firmer donors eager to stay aligned with the image of power. My chest tightened as the sound filled the room. The humiliation deepened. My eyes burned, but I would not look down. My heart hammered, and I forced my feet forward into the space of the aisle, into the center of the room. If they wanted me gone, they would have to make me leave in front of everyone. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the faces. 200 guests stared back. Some wide-eyed, some whispering, some already lifting their phones to record. Their screens glowed like judgment. I raised my chin, though my throat trembled. "This foundation was supposed to be about education," I said. "About children, about classrooms. about teachers who give their lives so kids can have a chance. My voice wavered, but I pushed on. And yet, here you are giving power to someone who has never spent a day teaching, who does not know the struggle of buying supplies with your own paycheck, who has never looked into the eyes of a child who cannot read. A murmur ran through the crowd. A few heads nodded at the back where teachers sat, but at the front, Ethan's laugh rang out cruel and cutting. He stepped closer, his breath hot with alcohol. "You think anyone here cares about your little classroom sob stories?" he sneered. "Look around Sam. These people care about influence, about connections, about money, and you have none of it." I clenched my fists. My voice cracked. "I have the truth." Ethan's smile sharpened. "And the truth is, no one wants you here." He shoved me again harder this time, and I stumbled back, colliding with a chair. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "Stop!" Another raised a phone higher, recording every second. I caught my balance, my breath ragged. My father did not move. He adjusted his cufflinks, eyes fixed on a donor across the room, as if ignoring me would make me vanish. Caroline's hand fluttered dramatically at her chest, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Poor Samantha," she said loudly. "Always making a scene, always craving attention." The words sliced deep. I thought of my mother, of the quiet dignity she had carried even through illness, of how she had taught me that dignity did not mean silence. It meant standing even when your knees shook. I straightened. "You cannot erase me," I said louder now. "You cannot pretend I don't exist." Richard's voice snapped like a whip. "Security! Take her out now!" The two guards moved in, one reaching for my arm. I twisted free, my heart pounding. The room blurred with emotion, glittering gowns, shifting donors, whispering glasses rattling against plates. And then Ethan stepped forward again, his face dark with rage. "You should have stayed quiet," he hissed. His fist drove into my stomach before I could react. Pain exploded through me, hot and crushing. Air rushed from my lungs. My knees buckled. I collapsed onto the polished floor, the red of my dress spreading like a wound against the wood. The music stopped abruptly. Glass shattered somewhere near the bar. Gasps turned to shouts. A woman screamed. I curled, clutching my side, the world tilting my breath shallow. Blood trickled from my lip, the metallic taste sharp on my tongue. Above me, Ethan stood chest heaving, his fists still clenched, his expression not of regret, but of triumph. Around us, 200 guests froze, unsure whether to help or to stay silent. And then one voice cut through, high-pitched and terrified. "She's dead!" A nurse who had been among the guests knelt beside me, her hands searching desperately for my pulse. The words shot across the room like a detonation. Phones lifted higher. The whisper spread. "She's dead." The ballroom descended into chaos. Women clutched their pearls, their manicured nails trembling against champagne flutes. Men barked for order. Security hesitated, unsure whether to hold Ethan or help me. My father finally turned his head, his face pale but unreadable, his jaw locked. Caroline clutched Ethan's arm, hissing something sharp in his ear, even as the cameras caught her. Through the ringing in my ears, through the pounding in my chest, I heard another voice. Firm, steady, urgent. "Call 911 now." Dr. Michael Harris, taller now than I remembered from childhood, had pushed through the crowd. His suit jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled, his medical badge flashing as he knelt beside me. "She's not gone," he told the nurse. "I've got a pulse, weak but present. Stay with me, Sam." The nurse's hands trembled as relief washed over her. "She's still here," she whispered, but the damage was done. 200 guests had heard her first cry. To them, I was already gone. I blinked, struggling to focus my breath shallow. Michael's face swam above me, his brown eyes fierce. "Don't you let them take this from you," he said under his breath. "Stay with me. You belong here." I wanted to answer, to tell him I was trying, but the pain was sharp. Each inhale a battle. Around us, the chaos swelled. Someone shouted for paramedics. Someone else demanded the music start again, desperate to pretend nothing had happened. Phones still recorded. Already the videos would be streaming onto social media, spreading like wildfire. Ethan's voice rose above the din, angry and defensive. "She's faking it. She always wants attention. Look at her, she's not even hurt." His words were desperate, but the blood on my dress and the gasps of the crowd told another story. Michael rose to his feet, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "She is hurt because your fist put her here." The silence that followed was electric. Heads turned, donors stared, Caroline's face froze. Richard finally stepped forward, his hand on Ethan's shoulder as if to shield him. "This is family business," he snapped. "Stay out of it." But Michael did not flinch. He looked directly at Richard, his voice sharp. "Family business ends when a 19-year-old lies bleeding on the floor." Gasps again. Someone applauded weakly at the back, quickly silenced, but the tide had shifted. The image of the perfect Dawson family was shattering before 200 witnesses. I struggled to lift my head to speak, but Michael pressed a hand gently against my shoulder. "Rest," he said quietly. "Let them see what they've done." His words sank into me. For the first time that night, I felt a sliver of strength return. I was not alone anymore. The breaking point had arrived. No amount of wealth, no glittering chandeliers, no orchestrated speeches could erase the truth of what had just unfolded. The donors had seen it. The teachers had seen it. The journalists had seen it. And the world through the glowing screens of phones was beginning to see it too. On the ballroom floor of the Pfister Hotel, I lay battered, but not broken. My stepbrother's fists had tried to silence me. My father's command had tried to erase me. My stepmother's sneer had tried to redefine me. But in that moment, with Michael's voice cutting through the chaos, a different truth took root. I was not gone. I was not erased. And the story of that night was no longer theirs to control. It was mine. The ballroom was spinning with panic voices overlapping shoes, clattering against the floor, phones buzzing with live streams. I lay curled on the ground, my breath ragged my ribs, screaming with each shallow inhale. The nurse still pressed 2 fingers against my neck, whispering, "She's alive! She's alive!" But most of the crowd had already believed the first scream that I was dead. Ethan loomed nearby, his fists still clenched, sweat glistening on his temple, his chest heaving with fury. Caroline's arm wrapped around him, her voice loud enough for all to hear. She slipped into the role of protective mother, declaring, "This is a misunderstanding, an accident." She tripped. He was only trying to help her up. The lies dripped from her mouth as easily as champagne into crystal. Richard finally moved, but not toward me. He angled himself between Ethan and the growing circle of murmuring donors, his voice sharp with the authority of a businessman used to commanding rooms. "Everyone calm down. We will handle this privately. Family business." He repeated that phrase like a shield. And then Michael Harris stepped forward, the noise of the room seeming to split around him. He was no longer just the boy I remembered from Kenosha, the neighbor who used to carry my backpack when I broke my wrist. He was a doctor now, a man whose voice carried weight. His brown eyes burned as he looked at Ethan, then Caroline, then Richard. He spoke not to them but to the room. "No, this is not family business. This is assault." The word dropped like a stone into the ballroom, ripples spreading fast. A few guests gasped. Others raised their phones higher, eager to catch every word. Ethan sneered. "You don't belong here, Harris. Stay out of it." Michael ignored him. He crouched back down beside me, his hand firm on my shoulder. "Samantha Dawson is a patient right now. She needs medical care, and every one of you saw what happened." His voice rose steady and clear. "This young woman was attacked in front of 200 witnesses." Caroline's face hardened, her public mask slipping into fury. "How dare you? You have no right!" Michael straightened slowly, towering over her, his voice calm but resolute. "I have every right. I was invited tonight as a consultant for the Foundation's health initiative. That makes me both a guest and a physician. And I will not stand by while you rewrite what we all saw." The crowd shifted. Teachers at the back nodded, whispering among themselves. Donors exchanged uneasy looks. Reporters clutched their notepads tighter. The story was already forming, and it was not the one Richard or Caroline wanted. Ethan barked. "She provoked me. She was screaming, disrupting the event." Michael's eyes flashed. "Nothing provokes a man to strike his sister to the floor in front of an entire city." His words sliced through the excuses like a scalpel. Richard stepped forward, his hand raised as if to command silence. Enough. Dr. Harris, we appreciate your concern, but this is not your place. Please leave before you embarrass yourself further. Michael did not flinch. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folder. His voice dropped lower, deliberate. I think this is my place exactly, because what you've been hiding is about to come to light. The crowd leaned closer. Cameras clicked. My pulse quickened despite the pain in my ribs. Caroline's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Michael opened the folder and lifted a stack of documents, his fingers steady. Financial Records Board charters contracts. This isn't just about what Ethan did tonight. This is about what has been happening for years. He held up a single page the Dawson Family Foundation charter signed when it was created. According to this document, the seat Richard Dawson promised his daughter was written into the bylaws. Samantha Dawson was named as a future board member the moment she reached legal age. A hush fell over the ballroom. Caroline blinked rapidly, her mouth opening then closing. Richard's face drained of color. Ethan barked out a laugh, but it rang hollow. That means nothing. Dad can change whatever he wants. Michael's gaze cut into him. Not when the charter is legally binding and already filed with the state. Not when donors and board members are here tonight as witnesses. Gasps swept through the crowd. A reporter whispered into his phone. Donors shifted, murmuring among themselves. Someone at the back clapped once sharply before falling silent. I blinked, trying to process Michael's words through the haze of pain. He looked down at me, his expression softening for just a moment. You were never supposed to be erased, Sam. You were written into this from the start. Caroline's mask cracked entirely. She hissed, You liar. You forged that. But Michael only held the papers higher. Check the state records. It's public. Anyone here can verify. A guest pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly, then gasped. He's right. Her name is there. Samantha Dawson, future board member. The murmur swelled into a roar. Donors pressed closer, teachers whispering furiously. Ethan's face darkened, his fists clenching again as if brute force could crush truth the way it crushed my body. Richard's voice trembled for the first time all evening. That was years ago. Things change. Michael did not look away. Things change, yes, but not legal documents, and not the truth. He stepped closer to the microphone on the stage, lifting his voice. Everyone here has seen tonight what happens when power is given to arrogance instead of integrity. You've seen a young woman nearly beaten unconscious for daring to speak. You've seen a father erase his own daughter. And now you see that the erasure was not just cruel, it was illegal. The room erupted. Some guests shouted questions. Others demanded explanations. Phones were held high, capturing every second. I could feel the tide shifting like a river, suddenly breaking through a dam. Caroline clutched Richard's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. Say something, she hissed. Deny it. But Richard's lips moved without sound. His eyes darted to the papers, then to the crowd, then finally to me. For the first time that night, he looked at me not as an embarrassment, not as an afterthought, but as a threat to the image he had built. Michael placed the documents on the nearest table for everyone to see. This is not just about Samantha. This is about every teacher, every student this foundation was meant to serve. Look at the numbers. Funds redirected, programs cut, money funneled into events like this gala instead of classrooms. His voice sharpened. Caroline Dawson and Ethan Dawson have manipulated this foundation for their own prestige. And tonight, you all saw exactly what that corruption looks like when someone dares to challenge it. The ballroom broke into chaos. Donors shouted. Teachers stood demanding answers. Reporters snapped photos furiously. Ethan lunged forward, his hand grabbing the edge of the papers, but Michael blocked him with one steady arm. Enough, Ethan, he said, his voice calm but commanding. Sit down before you add to the evidence against you. Ethan froze his chest, heaving his eyes, darting toward the cameras. Caroline hissed again, but even she knew the momentum had shifted. The power was slipping, and I, broken and battered on the floor, felt something I had not felt in years. Hope. Michael crouched back down beside me, his voice softer. "You're safe now, Sam. They cannot silence you anymore." I tried to speak, but only a whisper came. "Thank you." He shook his head gently. "Don't thank me. You always had the right to stand here. I'm just making sure they can't take it away." That was the moment the crowd stopped being passive guests and became witnesses. Witnesses to violence. Witnesses to truth. Witnesses to the collapse of a family empire built on control. The ally had stepped in and the tide was turning. The ballroom had transformed from a glittering celebration into a storm of outrage. Donors' voices rose in disbelief. Teachers pushed closer to the front, their eyes alight with anger and vindication. Reporters whispered into phones already dictating the scandal into tomorrow's headlines. Caroline's sequined gown no longer sparkled with triumph. It glittered with sweat under the lights as her hand gripped Richard's arm so tightly that her nails left marks. Ethan stood rigid, his fists still trembling, his chest rising and falling in furious rhythm. And in the middle of it all, Michael Harris held his ground with the calm of a man who knew the truth was heavier than any fist. He raised his voice so it cut across the chaos. "Tonight, you were told that Ethan Dawson would lead the foundation into the future," he said, his tone crisp. "But the real story is what has been hidden." He lifted another paper from the folder, waving it toward the crowd. "These are financial records. Records that show funds earmarked for classrooms and scholarships were redirected tens of thousands of dollars at a time into gala budgets, personal travel, and luxury expenses." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Donors turned to one another, eyes wide. One woman clutched her pearls so tightly her knuckles turned white. A man in the back muttered, "I gave $50,000 last year." "Where did it go?" Michael's words cut deeper. "It went here," he said, gesturing at the chandeliers, the imported orchids on the tables, the champagne in your glasses. Money meant for teachers and students became a vanity project for Caroline and Ethan. Caroline's face blanched, but she forced a smile, her voice sugary but trembling. "That's an outrageous claim. He has no proof." Michael stepped forward, placing the documents on the podium. "Proof is right here. Anyone can verify. These are certified audits, not my opinion." A donor near the front snatched up one of the papers, scanned it quickly, and paled. "It's true," he said in a shaky voice. "These are real." He tossed the page back onto the table as if it burned. The noise swelled panic and betrayal mixing into a roar. Phones filmed every second, capturing Caroline's mask, cracking Ethan's jaw, clenching Richard's silence. My father's legacy. The image he had so carefully curated for decades was unraveling thread by thread in less than 15 minutes. Michael's gaze shifted deliberately toward me, still lying on the ballroom floor, cradled by the nurse's steady hands. His voice softened but carried. "And the girl you saw attacked tonight, Samantha Dawson, is not only Richard's daughter, she is the rightful board member written into the foundation's charter. Her name has been there from the beginning. She is the voice this foundation was supposed to have." Gasps filled the air again, louder this time, followed by murmurs that grew sharper. Someone shouted, "She's the one who should be up there!" Another voice cried, "This is theft!" Ethan slammed his fist against the table so hard, glasses toppled. "Enough," he barked. "You don't get to rewrite history, Harris. You think anyone here cares about some weak college girl." He spat the words, venom dripping. Caroline pulled at his arm, hissing, "Stop talking." But it was too late. His voice carried recorded on a dozen phones. Michael did not flinch. He faced Ethan squarely. "Every person here cares. They care because they saw you strike her down. They care because their money was stolen. And they care because integrity matters." The crowd erupted again, this time with shouts of agreement. Donors waved their hands, demanding answers. Teachers rose to their feet, some in tears, others with fury etched into their faces. A local reporter stepped forward, his microphone raised. "Mr. Dawson," he said loudly to Richard, "did you know about this? Did you approve these fund diversions? Did you approve handing your daughter's rightful seat to Ethan?" Richard's mouth opened, but no sound came. His silver hair gleamed under the lights. his face ashen, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. Caroline stepped into the void, her voice sharp. He knew nothing. I managed the finances. I made the decisions. Richard was only following my advice. Her desperation cracked through the performance, her words frantic. Michael shook his head. That might have worked before, but not tonight. Not when there are 200 witnesses and live streams spreading across the internet. He turned toward the back where the glow of phones multiplied. Within minutes, this story will be everywhere. Indeed, murmurs from the crowd confirmed it. Already on Twitter, over 1,000 views. It's going viral. The whispers grew louder, feeding the frenzy. The nurse at my side pressed a cloth against my lip, her hand steady. "Stay with me," she whispered. I nodded faintly, my eyes never leaving the stage. I could feel the shift, the wave building not against me, but against them. Michael lifted one final paper. This, he said, is the contract with the Foundation's largest corporate sponsor. He tapped the clause with a steady finger. Section 12.1. Any public announcement of board appointments made without sponsor approval constitutes breach of contract. He let the words hang in the air before continuing. Tonight, Richard Dawson publicly appointed Ethan to a seat that not only was never his, it violated the sponsor agreement. That means, as of this moment, the $5 million funding commitment is at risk of being revoked. The effect was immediate and devastating. The donors erupted in outrage. A man at the front shouted, "You've cost us millions!" Caroline swayed on her heels, gripping the table for balance. Ethan's face went pale for the first time all night. Richard staggered back a step, his hand pressed to his temple as if the weight of the collapse pressed down all at once. Phones buzzed louder. One guest held up his screen and called out, "It's already on Facebook Live, over 10,000 watching. The hashtag Justice for Sam is trending." The crowd gasped again. In real time, the story had left the ballroom and entered the world. Michael's voice carried the final blow. This foundation was built on lies, on erasure, on abuse of trust. Tonight, you all saw it collapse. But know this, Samantha Dawson will not stay silent anymore. The ballroom shook with voices, with outrage, with the sound of a dynasty imploding in less than an hour. Ethan lunged forward again, his arm raised as if to strike, but security finally moved, pinning him back with firm hands. Caroline screamed, "Let him go! This is a setup!" But the crowd no longer listened. Richard sank into his chair, his hands trembling, his eyes locked on the floor. And me. I lay there battered but alive, my ribs aching, my lips bleeding, but something inside me surged. The nightmare had turned. For years they had erased me in silence. Tonight, their erasure was exposed in front of everyone. Tonight, I was not invisible. I was undeniable. The reveal was complete. The perfect family facade had shattered under the weight of truth, and nothing would ever be the same. The Pfister Hotel ballroom, once a stage for glittering celebration, had turned into a crime scene. Chandeliers still sparkled overhead, but the glow no longer felt like luxury. It felt like harsh interrogation lights exposing every secret. The applause that had once lifted Ethan and Caroline now rang hollow in memory, replaced by shouts, gasps, and the high whine of phones recording history in real time. I lay against the cold wooden floor, the nurse's steady hands pressing a cloth to my lip, Michael's presence like a wall between me and the chaos. My ribs screamed with each shallow breath, but inside me something steadier than pain had taken root. For the first time, the world was seeing what my family really was. The first wail of sirens outside cut through the noise, growing louder until red and blue lights washed across the tall windows. Gasps rippled through the guests. The Milwaukee Police Department had arrived. A pair of officers strode into the ballroom, their radios crackling their uniforms, a sharp contrast to the tuxedos and gowns. The chatter dulled to a hush. Every head turned. One officer, tall and broad-shouldered, surveyed the room. "Who's the victim?" Michael's hand rose immediately firm and unwavering. "Here, Samantha Dawson, 19, assaulted by her stepbrother." His voice left no space for denial. The officer's gaze dropped to me, taking in the blood, the swelling at my lip, the way I cradled my ribs. Then his eyes snapped to Ethan. Ethan's bravado cracked. He stammered, "It was an accident. She tripped. I was trying to help." The officer didn't blink. "Sir, you're under arrest for felony battery." He nodded to his partner. "Cuff him." The clink of metal echoed as handcuffs snapped around Ethan's wrists. Caroline shrieked, "You can't do this! He's my son! He's innocent!" She lunged forward, her sequined gown catching against a chair, but another officer moved in, blocking her path. "Ma'am, step back." Her protest only made the cameras focus tighter. Dozens of phones captured her twisted face, her diamond necklace flashing as she screamed. The donors shifted uneasily. Teachers whispered to one another, their expressions a mixture of horror and vindication. At the back, I saw Mrs. Lopez, one of my mother's old colleagues, wipe her eyes. Finally, she whispered, "Finally, the truth is out." Richard stood rooted in place, his face ashen, his hands shaking. He did not move to defend Ethan. He did not speak. For the first time in his life, the man who commanded schools' boardrooms and fundraisers had no words. His silence was louder than Caroline's protests. Michael stepped closer to the officers, handing them the folder of documents. "These are financial records," he said, his voice calm. "Evidence of misappropriation of funds by Caroline Dawson and Ethan Dawson." The officers exchanged glances, one flipping quickly through the papers. "We'll be reviewing these, sir." He looked up at Caroline. "Ma'am, you're not under arrest tonight, but you'll need to come in for questioning regarding financial fraud." Caroline's shriek died into a strangled gasp. The nurse helped me sit up slowly, wincing, as pain shot through my side. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. "Samantha, how do you feel? Did you know you were written into the charter? Will you press charges?" I opened my mouth, but Michael shook his head gently. "Not now. Let her breathe." As Ethan was escorted toward the doors, handcuffs gleaming under the chandelier light, the crowd parted like water. Some guests jeered. Others simply stared. Phones followed his every step. Someone whispered, "That's the end of the Dawsons." Outside, the sirens pulsed louder. Reporters rushed after the police, shouting questions. Caroline clutched her clutch bag to her chest, her face pale beneath the makeup, her lips pressed tight. Richard finally moved, stumbling toward me, his voice hoarse. "Samantha!" His hand reached out, but I flinched back, my body instinctively recoiling. The cameras caught it. The image of a father rejected by his own daughter spread like wildfire across the crowd. The officers cleared the space. Paramedics rushed in their gurney, squeaking across the polished floor. They lifted me gently, strapping me onto the stretcher, securing my neck, checking my pulse. My vision blurred with tears, but not of fear. For once, the humiliation was not mine. It was theirs. As I was wheeled toward the doors, applause began. Tentative at first, then stronger. Teachers rose from the back tables clapping. Then parents, then even a few donors who had seen enough corruption. The sound filled the ballroom, echoing against the chandeliers. It was not for Richard, not for Caroline, not for Ethan. It was for me. The hotel doors swung open. Cold December air bit my skin. The flashing lights painted the night sky red and blue. Cameras crowded closer, their lenses capturing every second as I was loaded into the ambulance. I heard the words on reporters' lips. Christmas gala scandal. Stepbrother arrested for assault. Foundation in crisis. Inside the ambulance, the paramedics worked quickly. Oxygen mask, blood pressure, IV line. Michael climbed in beside me, his presence steady. "You're going to be okay," he said softly. I wanted to speak, but the mask muffled my words. Still, my eyes met his. "Thank you," I mouthed. He nodded once, his hand covering mine. "You don't have to thank me. You deserved better all along." Back in the ballroom, chaos reigned. Guests streamed out, reporters filed live updates, and the Dawson name crumbled in real time. By morning, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel splashed the headline across its front page, "Stepbrother beats student at Christmas gala, nurse thought she was dead." The article detailed every moment from Caroline's introductions to Ethan's arrest, Michael's revelation, and my collapse. Photos of me on the floor. Ethan's fist clenched Caroline's screaming face. Richard's silence, each one captured the death of their carefully curated image. Social media burned hotter. On Twitter, the hashtag #JusticeForSam trended nationwide. The video of Ethan's punch played on repeat, paired with captions, "This is what happens when silence protects abusers." TikTok clips spliced my words. "You can't erase me" over footage of Ethan being led away in handcuffs. Instagram posts showed the gala decorations alongside screenshots of the charter with my name. The fallout spread quickly. By December 26th, sponsors announced they were pulling out of the Dawson Foundation. Northwestern Mutual, Baird Johnson Controls all released statements condemning violence and financial impropriety. Millions of dollars evaporated overnight. Donors demanded refunds. Teachers demanded accountability. The foundation that had once been Richard's pride collapsed like a house of cards. On December 28th, Ethan was formally charged with felony battery. The district attorney cited not only the physical assault, but the public nature of the crime and the dozens of witnesses. Caroline was subpoenaed for financial records. Richard resigned as president of the foundation under pressure from the board. The name Dawson, once synonymous with education philanthropy in Milwaukee, became a punchline for corruption and abuse. I left the hospital on January 2nd. My ribs bound my body, bruised but healing. Michael walked beside me, steady and constant. Outside the hospital doors, cameras waited. Reporters shouted questions. "What are your plans now? Will you take your father's place?" I paused, my breath visible in the cold air. For years, I said, my voice steady. They tried to erase me. Tonight, you all saw that. But I will not be erased anymore. I will fight for every teacher, every student, every voice that has been silenced. The cameras flashed. The words spread. By March, Ethan's trial concluded. He pled guilty, avoiding prison, but sentenced to 5 years probation and 1,000 hours of community service teaching literacy programs in the very schools he had mocked. Caroline faced civil suits for fraud. Her glittering social calendar vanished overnight. Richard retreated from public life, his reputation in ruins. And me, I began again. With Michael's help, with the support of teachers and donors who believed in truth, I launched the Samantha Dawson Foundation. Its mission was simple: to fund classrooms directly, to give teachers resources without bureaucracy, to make sure no child in Wisconsin went without books or supplies. By summer, the foundation had already granted scholarships to 50 students. Teachers sent letters of gratitude. Parents sent photos of their children holding brand new books. For the first time in years, I felt the promise my mother had given me bloom into reality. Christmas 2024 came with a twist of irony. The Pfister Hotel Ballroom once again hosted a gala. But this time, the banner did not read Dawson Family Foundation. It read Samantha Dawson Foundation. I stood at the podium, my red dress no longer a mark of humiliation, but of strength. The same chandeliers glowed above me, but now the applause was for me, for teachers, for students, for every silenced voice that refused to disappear. The consequences had been real. Ethan's record scarred. Caroline disgraced, Richard forgotten. But the larger truth was louder: when corruption crumbles, justice can grow in its place. And though my ribs still ached with memory, my voice was steady, my presence unshaken. I had survived. I had claimed my place. The nightmare that began with humiliation ended with rebirth. And for every teacher who had ever been told they were less, for every daughter who had ever been erased, I was proof. Silence does not win. The winter of that year felt different. Milwaukee was still bitterly cold, the wind whipping down the streets between tall glass buildings, but inside me, something had thawed. I had survived the night that almost erased me, and I had stepped into a future I thought had been stolen forever. The Samantha Dawson Foundation was real, alive, and growing. The people who had tried to silence me were no longer in control, their legacy rotting in the shadow of their own choices. In the weeks after the gala, the world kept asking me for answers. Reporters crowded outside my dorm at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Parents wrote letters, teachers sent messages, and former students from my volunteer work in Kenosha reached out to say they believed in me. At first, it felt overwhelming. I was still 19, still a college student juggling coursework, a part-time job at the library, and the weight of healing bruises. But slowly I realized this wasn't a burden, it was an opportunity. One evening, sitting in the small apartment Michael rented near Frohter Hospital, I let myself breathe. His place smelled faintly of coffee and laundry detergent stacks of medical journals scattered across the kitchen counter. He handed me tea and sat across from me, his brown eyes steady. "You don't have to carry all of this alone, Sam," he said, but I knew I did. Not because I was alone, but because I had been chosen by circumstance to show people that silence does not protect anyone. By March, the foundation held its first board meeting. David Chin, a donor who had once backed my father, agreed to chair. 5 veteran teachers joined along with 2 parent advocates from Milwaukee's public schools. We sat not in a high-rise boardroom, but in the community room of a neighborhood library. The walls were lined with shelves of worn books, children's drawings taped up in bright colors. It was exactly where this work belonged. As I looked around that circle, my chest filled with something I had not felt since before my mother died, belonging. Meanwhile, my father reached out. The first call came in January, his voice shaky on the line. "Samantha," he said, "I need to see you." I hung up. Weeks later, a letter arrived, his handwriting uneven. He wrote about regret, about how Caroline had misled him, about how he never meant to hurt me. I read the words, then folded the paper and set it in a drawer. Words without action meant nothing. For years, he had chosen silence, chosen image over truth, chosen Ethan over me. A single letter could not erase that. In April, I received a message through one of the foundation's staffers. Richard wanted to donate. A quiet contribution, no publicity. I refused. If he wanted redemption, it would not come through money. It would come through truth, through a public apology to every teacher he had dismissed, to every student he had ignored. But that apology never came. My father disappeared from the public eye, instead retreating into a house that must have felt too large, too empty. Ethan served his probation under the glare of cameras. Photos of him scrubbing graffiti off walls or stacking books in community centers appeared in local papers. Each one was captioned with the same reminder: the man who once mocked classrooms now worked in them as penance. Caroline, meanwhile, faced lawsuits for financial misconduct. Her glittering parties vanished. By summer, she was rarely seen in Milwaukee's social circles. The empire they had tried to build on my silence had collapsed entirely. But my story wasn't about them anymore. It was about the teachers. In June, the foundation awarded its first scholarships. 50 students from across Wisconsin received funds to attend college, their essays filled with dreams of becoming doctors, writers, scientists, and, yes, teachers. One recipient, a shy 17-year-old from Racine, wrote, "I want to be the kind of teacher who never lets a student feel invisible." Reading those words brought tears to my eyes. That was the heart of it all. That summer, I returned to Kenosha for the first time in years. I stood outside the small house where I had grown up, the one my mother had filled with warmth even when cancer hollowed her body. The porch paint was chipped now, the garden overgrown, but I could still hear her laughter in the creak of the floorboards, still feel her hand guiding mine as I wrote my first stories. I whispered aloud, "I did it, Mom. I made them see me," and I promised her I would make sure no other child felt erased. By fall, the foundation's work expanded. Teachers sent in receipts for supplies, paper books, even snacks for hungry children, and we reimbursed them directly. The gratitude that poured in was overwhelming. One third-grade teacher from Green Bay wrote, "I've been teaching 20 years, and this is the first time I've felt truly seen." Another from Madison said, "My students now have what they need because you refused to stay silent." The Pfister Hotel loomed in my memory all year. Each time I passed its tall red brick tower in downtown Milwaukee, I felt a sting of pain. But by December 2024, I decided it was time to reclaim it. The foundation held its first holiday gala there, not in the grand ballroom, but in the very same room where I had once lain bleeding. This time, the banner read, "Samantha Dawson Foundation." This time, the seats at the front belonged to teachers and parents. And this time, when I walked across the polished floor in a red dress, the applause was not polite. It was thunderous, genuine healing. I spoke that night, my voice steady under the chandeliers. A year ago, I said I was told I did not belong at this table. I was told I was ordinary, that I should stay silent. But teachers are not ordinary. Students are not ordinary. Every person who chooses service over status is extraordinary. The room rose to its feet, applause echoing off the walls that had once heard jeers and gasps. Later, as the music played and donations poured in, Michael found me near the stage. He handed me a glass of water, his smile soft. "One year," he said, "and look how far you've come." I shook my head. "Not just me. All of us." He tilted his head, studying me. "You've become the leader they never expected, the leader they tried to erase." That night, I finally felt the arc of my story bend toward closure. My father had chosen silence. Ethan had chosen violence. Caroline had chosen control. But I had chosen truth, and truth had built something stronger than their legacy ever was. The lesson was clear, one I wanted every person listening to hear. Your worth is not determined by those who fail to see it. Your voice does not vanish just because someone calls you ordinary. Silence protects no one. Only truth heals. Months later, during a quiet afternoon at the Foundation's office, a letter arrived. It was from a woman in Appleton, a teacher near retirement. She wrote, "I was ready to give up after 30 years. Then I saw your story. I stayed. My students thanked me the next day, and I told them it was because of you." I held that letter for a long time, my eyes wet. That was the true consequence of everything, the bruises, the humiliation, the collapse. It had given someone else the courage to keep going. Looking back, I realized the night at the Pfister Hotel was not only a breaking point, it was a rebirth. My family had tried to erase me, but instead they revealed me. They showed the world who I was by trying to silence me, and the world chose to listen. Now, when I walk into classrooms, students look at me not with pity, but with respect. Teachers greet me as one of their own. Parents thank me for refusing to back down. And Michael, always steady, always near, reminds me that survival was only the first step. The rest is living fully without apology. So here is the lesson I want to leave with anyone listening. Do not measure your worth by the seat you are denied at the table. Create your own table. Fill it with people who see you, who value you, who cheer when you speak. Family is not who silences you. Family is who stands with you when your voice shakes, when your body is bruised, when your truth is inconvenient. I am Samantha Dawson. I was erased, beaten, humiliated, but I survived. I reclaimed my place, and I built something new on the ruins of what tried to destroy me. To every teacher, every daughter, every survivor, you are not ordinary. You are extraordinary. And no one, no father, no stepmother, no brother can take that truth away. If you are still here with me listening to every beat of this story, I want to take a moment to turn away from the hotel lights and the courtroom documents and look directly at you. Because while this was my Christmas nightmare, I know I am not the only one who has lived through humiliation in a family, the sting of being told you do not belong, the ache of being treated as if your life is less valuable than someone else's reputation. And if you are part of my audience, especially those of you in your 50s, 60s, and beyond, you know how heavy those memories can be. Have you ever been at a family table where your voice was silenced, where your presence was tolerated but not celebrated? Have you ever watched someone else, someone with more power, more money, more status, take the seat that should have been yours? Maybe it wasn't a literal chair at a gala. Maybe it was an inheritance divided unfairly. Maybe it was the way one sibling was always praised while you were treated like background noise. Maybe it was your career choice dismissed as ordinary, even if it required all your heart and soul. I have spoken to enough teachers, enough parents, enough survivors to know that stories like mine echo in thousands of living rooms. And what I want to tell you, especially if you are listening from a small town in Wisconsin, or from a retirement community in Florida, or from a farmhouse in Kansas, is this: you are not alone. Your worth was never in their approval. Your value was never measured by their applause. When I think about the faces of the guests that night, the ones who gasped, the ones who whispered, the ones who raised their phones, I wonder how many of them had lived something similar at home. How many had fathers who refused to see them, mothers who turned their backs, brothers or sisters who used cruelty as control. Because the truth is, toxic families are not rare. They hide behind beautiful clothes and smiling photographs, but underneath they wound their own. To the women listening who raised children while working double shifts and were told they never accomplished anything, I see you. To the men who were dismissed by their fathers because they didn't follow the family business, but instead followed their own path, I see you. To the grandparents raising grandchildren because their own children walked away, I see you. And to every teacher, every nurse, every caretaker who gave your life to others and were told it wasn't enough, you matter. When I was on that ballroom floor tasting blood, hearing the word dead echo in my ears, I realized that humiliation had tried to finish me. And yet here I am telling you the story. Here I am proof that survival is possible. But more than survival, here is the proof that you can build something greater from the ruins. This is where I ask you not only to listen, but to speak. I want to know, have you ever had to stand up in front of people who doubted you? Have you ever had to walk away from family because staying meant losing yourself? Have you ever chosen purpose over prestige and been mocked for it? Tell me in the comments below. Share your story. Because your story might be the one that gives another person the courage to finally set boundaries. I know that many of you are in your 50s or 60s looking back on decades of choices, decades of family history. Maybe your parents are gone now, but their words still echo. Maybe your siblings still hold grudges that began when you were children. Maybe you still ache over a seat you were denied at a wedding, a graduation, a family dinner. Please know those moments do not define your worth. When you write in the comments, you are not only talking to me, you are talking to someone else out there who needs to hear that they are not crazy, that they are not weak, that what happened to them is real. This community we are building story by story is a place where silence is broken, where dignity is reclaimed. And let me be very clear. Forgiveness is not the same as erasure. You do not have to forgive those who never admitted their harm. You do not have to excuse the ones who bruised you, silenced you, humiliated you. You can release them from your life without releasing the truth. You can build boundaries of steel wrapped in compassion. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to say no more. Think about your own Christmas nights, your own holiday tables. Were they filled with warmth or were they stages for cruelty? Were you celebrated or were you the one expected to clean up in silence while someone else took the spotlight? These are the questions worth asking because holidays have a way of exposing the truth of a family. For me, it was the Pfister Hotel. For you, maybe it was a dining room with chipped plates. But the sting is the same. I invite you to reflect on this. What would justice look like for you? Not revenge, but justice. For me, justice was not Ethan in handcuffs, though that mattered. It was not Caroline's disgrace, though that mattered too. True justice was standing in that ballroom 1 year later under the same chandeliers and claiming my space as the leader of a foundation that actually cared. Justice was reclaiming the place they tried to deny me and making it serve others. What would it look like in your story? Would it be cutting ties with the ones who diminish you? Would it be finally pursuing the dream you were told was impossible? Would it be teaching your grandchildren that worth is not measured in applause but in kindness? Think about it, and then share it. The audience for these stories is not just an audience, it is a chorus. Every comment is a note, every testimony a harmony. Together they build a song louder than any humiliation, a song that says we are still here. And so I ask you if this story resonated to take a step further. Subscribe to this channel, not because I need numbers, but because each subscription tells the world that stories like these matter. Click the bell so you do not miss the next story, because each week I bring another voice out of the shadows. And when you share this video, you are not sharing my pain, you are sharing hope. You are giving someone else the chance to say me too. If you are watching from Milwaukee or from anywhere in Wisconsin, let me know in the comments. If you are watching from across the United States or even across the world, tell me where you are listening from. It matters to see how far stories of survival travel. It matters to show that from small towns to big cities, from farms to apartments, people everywhere understand this pain. And to those of you who are teachers, nurses, or anyone who has ever been told you are just something, just a teacher, just a mother, just ordinary, write those words in the comments and reclaim them. Write just extraordinary. Write just enough. Write your truth in capital letters so that no one can erase it again. I will be reading every comment. Not skimming, not glancing, reading. Because your stories deserve to be heard as much as mine. And I want this channel to be a place where the silenced speak, where the humiliated stand, where the ordinary prove they were extraordinary all along. When you finish listening, take one more step, share this story with someone you know has been through family pain. A sister who was overlooked, a brother who was mocked, a friend who has been erased by their own blood. Send it to them and say, I thought of you. Because sometimes the smallest gesture, a link, a message, a note, can be the lifeline someone needs. The gala at the Pfister Hotel was my breaking point, but it was also my turning point. Maybe your breaking point is still ahead, or maybe it happened years ago. Either way, it can be the moment you begin again. The moment you say, I will not be erased. So, here is my final invitation. Comment, share, subscribe, build this community with me. Let's fill it with voices that refuse silence. Let's make it a table where everyone belongs. Because no one, no father, no stepmother, no stepbrother has the right to tell you that you are less. Thank you for staying with me through every rise and fall, every humiliation, and every victory. Thank you for being part of this journey. And now, the floor is yours.